Hey, it's JK. So back when I first started doing these multi-cycle runs, my goal was to test out a lot of different mechanics and builds in the Souls games I'd never used while executing them in a challenge run format. Well, one thing I can say I've never really used in Dark Souls 1 are infusions, more specifically what I like to call the Tier 2 infusions. These are the infusions that can only be made when you've already infused your weapon with something else. So, in the first cycle here, we'll be using the Enchanted infusion, only available once you've already got a +5 magic infused weapon. For the New Game Plus cycle, I'll only be using the Occult infusion, only available once you've got a +5 divine weapon. Then, for the final cycle in New Game Plus, I'll be using the Chaos infusion, only available once you've got a weapon with a +5 fire infusion. Now, let me address what you're probably thinking. But JK, you're just going to beat the game with an infused weapon? That doesn't sound like much of a challenge. Well, this may surprise you, but this run actually ended up being possibly the most painful Dark Souls 1 multi-cycle run yet. That's for two reasons. First, the damage at certain points in this run, particularly in the latter cycles, was some of the lowest I've seen in a long time. Perhaps that might have been because the only two weapons I used for these infusions were the Longsword and the Bastard Sword, two weapons which drop off hard after New Game. Why did I only use these two lower tier weapons, you ask? Well, because the number of weapons I could actually wield was kinda limited. That leads me to point number 2. I decided, for some reason, that each cycle I would only be able to level the stat the infusion scales with. So, in New Game, I only leveled Intelligence. In New Game Plus, I only leveled Faith, and in the final cycle, I didn't level anything because Chaos doesn't scale with any stat. This means base level health and stamina throughout the whole of this run, with me being one-shot of frequent occurrence. So, yeah, now you see. So, let's crack on with this with all the enthusiasm I can muster. To begin, we make our character Derp Fusion. By the way, big shout out to the commenter who let me know that by choosing the Jubilant Katarina base and then pushing the color slider to green, you can easily make a green-skinned character. I want to see everybody writing praise the green in the comments. For class, we choose Warrior for the Longsword, and for gift we of course choose Master Key. Just like the night after my stag party, I wake up in a prison cell where a citrus fruit wearing armor throws me a key to escape. I then run and grab our Longsword, thank Lemon the only way I know how, and kill the Asylum Demon normally. I'm going to be killing him normally on all 3 cycles. Because I can't start with an infusion on the first cycle anyway, it only seems fair to do the exact same across the board here. Part of the run I didn't mention is that I want to see how much effort it takes to get our basic longsword up to the desired infusion right from the start of the game. Plus, it's only the tutorial boss anyway, no point wasting time Asai slumming it with this guy. With that, we make it to the Ice Zelda Shrine and the run really begins. First, I grab all the poppable souls in the area. So the first step for this cycle is to get our longsword infused with magic and upgraded to +5. The good news is the blacksmith capable of doing this, Rickard of Vinheim, is just below Firelink Shrine in New Londo Ruins. The bad news is that, we need a +5 weapon and some green titanite shards for him to perform the infusion. Well, let's solve the first part of that. Using the Master Key, we head into Drake of Valleys, grabbing more poppable souls along the way. We then run all the way through Darkroot until we make it to our old friend, Astor of Andrea. Using all the poppable souls, we get our weapon up to +4. We then took out the Berenike Knight up here for the shard he drops, and now our longsword is +5. So, part 1 is complete. As for the green titanite shards though, well, that's a little bit trickier. There is one down in the catacombs, but going all the way down there for just one feels like a lot of effort for very little. So instead, we're going to head to somewhere just as awful for hopefully slightly more reward. Blight Town. First, there's one green shard lying around right here, but the green shards we need can also be dropped by the leeches. The drop rate is about 2%. Now, if that sounds low, well, that's because it is. Liquid Humanity does help the drop rate, but I'm not going to try and pretend that this didn't take a while. There is one saving grace though. When the drop does happen, they don't just drop one green titanite shard, they drop 5. This brings us to 6 total, but we need 9, so just gotta farm for one more. After a couple more runs, we get 5 more precious green shards. I feel like I need to wash myself with bleach after being down here so long. With that, we make our way out of Blight Town, return to Rickett, turn the longsword into a magic longsword, and upgrade it to +5. We're on our way at last. Now seems like a good time to test out the damage. So let's go take on the Bell Gargoyles. Okay, well it's quite a lot of damage actually, especially for such a fast swinging weapon. The first one goes down after not too many swings, and the second goes down in just 3 hits. He was completely incapable of doing anything here. So the first bell is rung. Now one thing you might have noticed is that I haven't leveled up at all yet. Well, that's because I've been saving up souls to buy the Art of Crestorius from Astray, because guess what? We can actually get what we need to reach our desired infusion right now. It's guarded by these mushroom parents who weren't too pleased to see me. Babs refused to call them off, so I had to just lure them away and then run to quickly open the chest and grab our prize, the Enchanted Ricket, which we can give to Ember of Vinheim. But of course, now we need a different upgrade material, blue titanite chunks. We can get one from the Black Knight here at the bottom of Darkroot Garden. You can also farm them from these blue crystal golems right by the Hydra. The drop rate is 8%, which is a bit better than the leeches, but they do only drop 1 at a time unfortunately. Luckily, there is a way we can get some more damage right now. Our sword's magic damage scales with a C in intelligence, so we level that up, which will give us some more DPS. Higher damage numbers equal happy JK. This felt like a much quicker farm than the leeches though, and to be honest, I think that's not due to me, that's due to the Hydra taking them out. I even got 2 chunks in the same run at one point. There's also 2 chunks in the Great Hollow which I could have gotten, but this felt easier. With the 8 chunks we needed, I quickly trek Lao Kick off this cliff to get the Fap Ring, and then give all the stuff to Ember of Vinheim to get ourselves an Enchanted Longsword, +4. The only thing left to max upgrade our weapon now is a blue titanite slab, but we can't get that till much later. But, effectively, we've got a +14 weapon without having to go very far. We didn't even need to kill the gargoyles, it was just helpful for the souls. Now, let's actually make some progress. I get intelligence up to 24, and we go to take on Quelaag. Let's see what the damage looks like. You know that's not bad, but for a +14 weapon though, should that be a little bit more? I mean, in fairness, our intelligence isn't that high and we do have an A scaling in intelligence now, so leveling up that would probably have helped. Given the reasonably fast weapon swing, getting 3 or so hits in does rack up the damage. She did catch me with a couple of hits and it does quite a bit given our lack of health, but eventually I get stuck inside her, landed a few more swings, and then flushed this spider down the lavatory. Bell 2 is now rung, and everyone's favourite fortress is now open. I get intelligence up to 30 now. On the way back out of Blighttown, I thought I'd test out our damage on the high and tight demon. This seemed a lot better, and we took him out in about 6 hits. Anyway, we enter the House of Senators and grab the Ring of Steel protection on the way up. More defense will help with our low health. The snakes go down in 3 quick hits, which is nice. The giant up top also went down pretty swiftly, and I was so cocky I went into the fight with Iron Golem without even activating the bonfire up here. Our damage was okay. I mean, part of it is physical, which the Golem resists heavily, so to be expected. I nearly had a heart attack when he caught me in the grab, but thankfully he didn't actually throw me off. I would 100% have deserved it though. After a few more swings, he toppled over, although sadly not off the edge. I hit a few more heavy swings here, and then shortly after used my magic to send Ron Weasley back to Hogwarts. Alright, Anor Londo time baby. With all the souls gained, I managed to get intelligence up to 40, which is a pretty healthy number. I absolutely speedrun through the rafters past all these pesky Ians, and tell this Silver Knight that there was some treasure down below. The giant blacksmith here sells green titanite shards, so I buy a couple as we will need some more later on. So of course, Ornstein and Smo guard the way. I decided to take out Ornstein first this time. The damage was decent actually. Ornstein normally resists damage more than Smo, so I was happy with this number. Not sure why Ornstein just decided to walk into the fog gate at one point though. I did get smacked up quite a few times, and that first phase nearly ended me, but luckily Smo jumped back and I finished off Ornstein shortly after. Damage against Smo was much better, but of course he has a lot more health now. We can stagger him with enough hits, which was handy, and as long as we stayed close, most of his melee attacks were easy enough to avoid. I used a few heavy attacks at the end to finish him, giving me a big boost to my Smo-ral. With that handled, I get up to 45 intelligence, and Guinevere gives me the Lord Vessel. Back in Firelink, I greet Frampt with a plunging attack, and then open up the world by placing the Soup Bowl. We want to get that blue titanite slab ASAP, so the Duke's Archives are our next destination. Nothing like a big armoured boar to humble you if you're feeling too cocky. After getting my revenge in an honourable duel, I attempted the Seath skip, remembered why I don't do the sea skip, killed the crystal guy with absolute ease, and took the forced death instead. A snake man then played his mixtape, which seemed to upset these little Cthulhus so much they tried to escape. Don't worry guys, now you won't have to listen to it ever again. Anyway, I escaped out and got the next bonfire. Now, let's go get that slab. It should be noted that the moonlight butterflies here have a 0.2% chance to drop a slab. But firstly, that's an insanely low drop rate, and secondly, I've never tried to fight one with melee before, and do these things ever land? Now, the actual guaranteed blue titanite slab here is probably one of the more hidden items in the whole game. I wouldn't be surprised if many people didn't even know this existed. First, you drop down to the invisible pathway, and then turn around and go into this tunnel with the crystal lizards. Now, there's a twisting invisible path here. You need to pay very close attention to the crystal flakes falling to see where you're going. It definitely doesn't help when this golem somehow managed to chase me down and start swinging at me while I tried to navigate it. Luckily, I got through and grabbed our blue titanite slab prize. Finally, we now have a max upgraded enchanted longsword. As we're back in Firelink anyway, let's go take out all the bosses still left in this area. With Taurus Demon, I charged in and 3 strikes was enough to take him out. A bullish approach is the best for this one it seems. Next up, because I was still annoyed with his crystal cave cousin, I went to take on the moonlight butterfly. I kinda assumed this thing would have very high resistance to magic and that this was going to take a while, but nope. Its attempts to butter me up did not quell my rage, and shortly after it died. Heading back down, I finally managed to backstab this boar. I genuinely have never pulled that off before. I thought the only game you could do it in was Bloodborne. Okay, let's head to lower. Did I just iframe the Drake's fire? What? Anyway, down below, we head into Capra Demon. After taking out the dogs in 1 hit each, I landed a plunging attack on Capra which connected in full and nearly took him out. He did smack me afterwards, but with 1 more hit from me, he dies, no cap. I then head to the depths where I butcher the butcher, eradicate the giant rat, and channeled my anger against the channeler. The gaping dragon was up next. This was probably some of the most satisfying damage yet. Obviously we're using an endgame weapon against a relatively early game boss, but this guy has quite a bit of health, and seeing it just melt like that was pretty incredible. Needless to say, this was a really smash-mouth affair. The souls from those last few bosses got us up to 50 intelligence. Okay, so onwards back to the asylum. It was a long journey, so we had to take a Crover night flight. I'll just take out these torch hollows and... I said I'll just take out these torch hollows. These guys are the worst. Anyway, let's go fight the stray demon. 4 slashes is enough to easily take out a sizable chunk of his health. It wasn't quite as much of a blitz as the gaping dragon, but given this guy has one of the highest health pools in the entire base game, I will certainly take this damage. He is fairly weak to slash damage anyway, so with a continued assault, I cover my weapon in his innards so that it goes from a straight sword into a straight sword. While here, we of course grab the peculiar doll, which will let us enter the painted world. Here, I told this dragon some jokes which caused it to die. It appears it went from undead to pundead. I then entered Priscilla's boss room and attacked her immediately. Needless to say, she was pretty cross. She did hit me with a couple of scythe swings, but I knocked her out of her invisibility shortly after. For no real reason, I decided to cut her tail off and then ended her with a strong attack for a rather pristine finishing sequence. Well, let's make our way back home. Whee! Back in Anor Londo, I threw one of my brand weapons right at Guinevere's neck just to really annoy Gwendolyn. Now, surely if one boss is going to resist magic, it'll be... Okay, nope, that damage is still pretty good. I couldn't quite 2-cycle Gwendolyn annoyingly, but it didn't matter too much as one heavy attack from the sword brought him down. Maybe if he'd brought some dark sunscreen, it might have protected him. I now upgrade our intelligence to 57. With all those bosses down, let's now head to Sif. Initially, this was going really well. A little too well, in fact. Sif was nearly dead, and I had not even taken a single hit. But then, of course, I got hit and nearly choked. I took another hit which somehow didn't kill me, I think because Sif was in her limping phase, and the damage she was doing was lessened, but whatever the case, I'll take it. I should have been a little less aggressive there, honestly. I boost intelligence up to 60 now, and there's not much point getting it any higher. The damage isn't going to go up much further. So let's head into New Londo now. I get the key to the sea lion from Ingwood and drain the water. I also realized at this point I can't get more than 10 Estus because I haven't killed Pinwheel. I'm sure it'll be fine. Also, for once, I'm not going to cheese this fight with heavy armor. I'm just going to wear what I'm wearing right now. Maybe I'll change my mind when we get to the later cycles. Anyway, the damage here was okay. I did take some hits, but there was enough time to heal through them. Higher stamina would have definitely allowed me to finish this quicker. The second king was being a bit more difficult, mainly because he decided to waste time by spamming the AoE a couple of times. Eventually, I sliced him down. The third started with a grab which I was able to avoid easily, but then he caught me with an explosion. Luckily, I was able to heal up and finish him just before the fourth king joined. This guy took just 2 hits to bring down, resolving our Abishu for now. As we're not leveling up now, I used the souls to buy more green Titanite shards for later. Next up, a trip to the catacombs is on the cards, and the first pyromancer drops a skull lantern. Handy. I narrowly make it into the fog door without dying, and then absolutely crush Pinwheel with minimal issue as to be expected. Hey, the Mask of Me! If all 3 of Pinwheel's masks were this, we could call him Trinidad. We now blitz through my least favourite area, Tomb of the Giants, but did manage to take out the Black Knight on the way before resting at the second bonfire. I then charged ahead and took out Paladin Leroy Jenkins and then dropped in to say hi to Nito. I mainly kept the 3 skeletons at the back of the room here and killed them as they rose up until Nito was close enough to attack without being in danger of aggroing the rest of his cronies. The damage was alright, and with Nito also helping to take down the other skeletons, this was not too bad. Did you know this boss tried to make music but it turned out terrible? It seems he was knee-tone deaf. Well, let's try a boss that definitely resists magic, Seath the Scaleless. Ah yes, there we go. Yay, mediocre damage. Okay, this took quite a few hits, even going for his weak point, but obviously Seath is pretty easy and slow to read. Despite our scaled down damage, he's not much of a roadblock. Okay, so given how even a highly magic resistant boss like Seath went down without much trouble, I think it's pretty clear we need to get to the DLC to see how our damage holds up, so let's quickly clear up the last of the base game, Rapid Fire. First, Ceaseless ceases to be. Then, this demon ingests a high dosage of my sword. The centipede didn't have a leg to stand on, or an arm, or a tail. I embedded my sword deep into this bug. The Hydra got dehydrated. The Crystal Golem got cracked. And as usual, Challenger Handy drags us to the DLC. It's everybody's favourite up next, Ian the Sanctuary Guard. Ian is actually the DLC boss with the lowest defenses, so seeing that damage drop off there doesn't fill me with confidence going forward. It took 4 running attacks to cut off his tail, and a pretty big number of hits beyond that to finally deplete his health. I get the feeling we're going to get stung soon, and not by Ian's tail. Why do I get the feeling that's a sign of things to come? Yep, that's certainly bad damage. Probably should have come in here with more than just 4 Estus too. That was a little cocky. This was easily the most intense fight of the run so far, and the first time that not upgrading stamina and health really came into play. Considering I could only safely punish with 1 attack each time, I went for the heavy attack for that 30 points extra damage. Any single hit from him hurt a lot, and at some points it was a mad panic trying to heal. I even had to choose to heal instead of breaking his buff animation at one point, which was pretty scary. It was a nearly 7-minute back and forth of sword swings. However, I thankfully didn't choke, and with a last swipe, I secured the victory. It's a shame he couldn't stay to show me around, give me the Artorias. Up ahead, I grab the Kest Kree, clear out the sorcerers blocking the way, and prepare to face Manus. So the damage is comparable to Artorias, but Manus has twice the health. Ooh boy. To say the damage has dropped off hard for the DLC would be an understatement. I guess one good point is I found there were more opportunities to hit Manus than Artorias, so getting 2 heavy attacks in was definitely possible. The fight still went on for around 7 minutes, and I had a couple of close calls. 2 hits were enough to kill me with most of his attacks. It didn't come down to the wire quite as much as Artorias did, but this is not giving me a lot of hope for the coming cycles. Regardless, a few more swings bring him down despite my damage handicap. Well, only 1 remains. Hi Calamite. Bye Calamite. But guess what? We can't even clear 100 points of damage with a heavy attack. Also, he hits really hard. Ouch. This unsurprisingly was the longest fight of this cycle. Fun fact, in my first ever playthrough of Dark Souls 1, I was using a Lightning Falchion against Calamite because I had heard that dragons in this game were weak to lightning. The damage then was comparable to what I'm seeing here, and yeah, that first playthrough against Calamite was pretty brutal. This was a drawn out slog, and at times Calameet's famous hitboxes really messed me up here. Towards the end, he got really angry, and I nearly died several times, unable to land those final blows on him. Luckily, I did push through and laid in the last few slashes to calamity up our victory. Okay, the DLC is done, and we can finish up this cycle. I watched a couple of Black Knights ride the Kiln's water slide, and now let's take a moment to reflect on this cycle. How did this infusion perform? Well, for the base game, the damage was certainly serviceable, even pretty decent at some points. But was it worth getting all those shards and chunks? I kind of feel like you could upgrade a weapon down the normal path and get more damage out of it. The one situation I could see this being useful is if you're a sorcerer anyway and you want a melee weapon in case you run out of casts or find yourself in close quarters combat. Even then though, why not just use a normal weapon and the spell magic weapon or great magic weapon? In any case, Gwyn is torn as cinder and we head off into the darkness towards the next cycle. Speaking of darkness, about half the people watching these videos aren't subscribed, so how about coming out of the darkness and into the glorious light of the subscribed? We're aiming for 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we are getting pretty close. Thank you, I appreciate you all. Anyway, for the occult cycle, we switch back to an uninfused longsword. Now, while I do want to give myself a comparable experience of what it would take to get these infusions right off the bat, I have started with the longsword at +5 to save a little bit of time. I'd only end up running to Andre and do it anyway, so this is a nice little time save. Okay, Asylum Demon is dead, and we make it to Firelink. We still need to go to Andre anyway, as he is in fact our blacksmith of choice for this cycle, but we need to get the necessary materials. To get the Occult infusion, the first step is to make a divine weapon, for which we of course need the Divine Ember. Unfortunately, it's locked behind the Moonlight Butterfly. At least we should be able to take it out easy enough. What is that damage? Why is it so low? I mean, I know it's New Game Plus, but come on! Okay, what have I got? Black Fire Bombs? Okay, damage is decent there. Shame I only have 10 of them. What about Throwing Knives? Okay, that's pretty low, but it's something. Alright, we're almost there. Well, that's 10 minutes of my life I'm never getting back. Luckily, I have a beer trick up my sleeve. Yep, I summoned for the Moonlight Butterfly. I'm not even ashamed. I did say I wanted to get the upgrades ASAP, and this definitely was the route which was the quickest. With that, we get the Divine Andre to give to Ember of Astora. Now, the next step would normally have been the Leech farm down in Blighttown again, but I want to avoid repetition and save me doing another hour of farming, so I brought some over with me from the previous cycle. We now have a +5 Divine Longsword, dealing magic damage that scales with Faith at C level. For this cycle, we will of course only level the Faith stat as our weapons scale with it, so I get Faith up to 20. So now, we've got a few things to do before we can get up to the Occult infusion. First, I go grab the doll from the Undead Asylum. My goal is to get the Occult infusion before we do Ornstein and Smo, for a reason that I'll cover a little bit later. For that, we need the Dark Ember from the Painted World, and a good supply of White Titanite chunks. For the chunks, we've got to brave the catacombs early. The good news is our divine weapon does permakill the skeletons, but the bad news is our damage still isn't very good at this stage. At least the heavy attack does stun them though, which means we're not totally boned. Our first goal here is to chain backstab this Black Knight. This guy drops a guaranteed White Titanite chunk, so that's one down. Next, in a moment of insane luck, I managed to make the run past all the Bone Wheels to Pinwheel's boss room without dying. This was a much longer fight than last time, and honestly I almost died. That last section where Pinwheel summons the huge amount of clones could have been very bad if I hadn't managed to somehow dodge the attack. If you thought I knew what I was doing there, and not just smashing the roll button hoping for the best, well hey, I appreciate your faith in me. We luckily struck the real one to put a pin in this encounter. Oh hey, the Mask of Leeds Jr. With that, we make it to Tomb of the Giants, and yes, I do know I have a horrible run out of here. In a huge stroke of luck, I fell off the edge and somehow got a White Titanite chunk, so thank you Black Knight I guess? That was what I was trying to get anyway. There's also another one a little further ahead here, and one in the pit where Patches pushes you down. Finally, you can farm them from these bone towers down in the pit also at a drop rate of 5%. It only took 2 runs to get all but one of the chunks I needed. Even though that part was quick, the route to get the chunks is worse than the previous cycle, because now we got to get out of Tomb of the Giants without fast travel. Worth noting, there are 2 White Titanite chunks in the Great Hollow you could get, but you'd still need to come down here as well to get enough. After another nerve-wracking Bone Wheel danger run, I ran up and grabbed the Dark Moon Seance ring on the way. I was doing pretty well until I died because my character read the message to go up instead of actually climbing the ladder. Why does my guy not want to climb this ladder? Anyway, I finally made it back to the bonfire and from there back to Firelink. That was horrible. The next stop is Anor Londo, which means absolutely no rest for us whatsoever. We head down to Old Blighty and then level up Faith to 23 and do some leg stretches. I'm somehow predicting the damage against Quelaag is going to be pretty poor. Yeah, that's about what I thought it would be. The heavy attack was a little better, but still not good. Why do I keep finding myself fighting Quelaag with really low damage lately? The scariest part was when she jumped, landed on me, and then instantly started preparing the explosion. I genuinely have no idea how I survived that. I kept running, hitting her legs with heavy attacks, and after a solid 6 minutes, we chaostracized this witch from the world of the living. This time, the second bell is rung first. I raise Faith to 25 and get back up to Firelink. I freed Lautrec to get a Sunlight Medal and then traded that with Snuggly for the last white chunk we need. Okay, let's rush to Anor Londo. Gargoyles first, of course. Finally, we actually see something that looks like decent damage. I mean, it's one of the first bosses in the game, but still, I'll take it at this point. I actually ended up taking out the second gargoyle first this time, for no real reason, and then a few more swings disabels the first one. The bell is rung, and Sens opens up once again. With Faith at 28 now, we run on through the blades and snake men who come onto me without my consent. Up top, I could have killed the giant to stop the bomb throwing, but apparently destroying them also stops him and is much quicker. The good news is that it does actually stop the giant throwing the bombs. The bad news is that Iron Golem now one-shots me. Ouch. Good thing I rested at the bonfire at the top and didn't just go into the boss fight feeling cocky again. Yeah, what kind of idiot would do that? Alright, time to lock in for Iron Golem. Well, the damage is low as you'd probably expect by this point, so I was really hoping to topple him off. I really didn't know if I'd be able to, but luckily I got him shaking, and with enough heavy attacks in a row, he did indeed tumble to his demise. Look at the giant disappointment on that guy's face. We now fly up to Anor Londo, get Faith to 32, and make straight for the Painted World. Unfortunately, I had to navigate these god-awful sewers to get the Annex key, which I somehow miraculously didn't die while doing. I even turned the crank in here for once. We make our way into the Annex and grab the Dark Andre at last. Alright, well now we just gotta beat Priscilla and get out of here, which should be a pretty trivial effort. Why does this keep happening? On the next try, I avoided making any Priscilla mistakes and took her down. Right, we get out of here and walk back to the starting Anor Londo bonfire. I then head back down to Sen's fortress, grab the cage key, take the cage lift back down, and then give the Dark Andre to Ember at last. We can now turn our Divine Longsword into an Occult Longsword and get it to +4. Now you might be wondering why I went to all that effort to ensure I had this before Ornstein and Smough. Well, certain enemies and bosses in the game are actually weak to the Occult status, and thus take more damage from Occult-infused weapons. It should be noted that it's not a lot. There's only 4 normal enemies and 4 boss enemies that take more damage from Occult, and almost all of them are here in Anor Londo. One of them is Gwyndolin. If I'm honest, the damage was probably the best I've seen on this cycle, but that's not saying much. I mean, do keep in mind that it's New Game Plus, so obviously these bosses do have way more health, but it certainly isn't lighting the world on fire. With enough strikes, we take him out. No surprise given I am a seasoned veteran of this fight. With his souls, we get up to 37 faith. Occult weapons have an A scaling in faith, so we should get more bang for our buck with this as well. Another enemy that supposedly takes more damage from Occult is these Sentinels, and yeah, that's actually not bad numbers. Same with the Silver Knights up ahead. I was able to take them out with just a couple of swings. The last normal enemy that's weak to Occult are these annoying Royal Sentinel guys right before the boss fog. They took about 5 or 6 hits to bring down, which again for New Game Plus isn't bad at all. Of course, the real test is Ornstein and Smough. Testing it out on Ornstein, the damage is okay, I guess. The information online for this, by the way, was absolutely terrible. One of the wikis said that both Ornstein and Smough are weak to Occult, while the other said it's only Ornstein. Also, none of them actually mention how much extra damage enemies weak to Occult take from it. After some deep digging, it's apparently 10%, which explains why it didn't really feel like much. Apparently you can tell by the number it says next to the occult status, so if it says 110 for example, it means you're doing 10% extra damage. With enough dodging and slashing, I took out Ornstein with maybe about 12 to 13 hits. For Smo, the damage he took was decent, but is that because he's weak to occult or because he's just got weak defenses? Honestly, who knows? I stayed close up to him and baited his closer range melee attacks, which were an easy punish. Finally, he falls to our Smoke-Cult weapon. With Faith at 41 and the Lord Vessel in hand, we return now to Tomb of the Giants, where I actually grabbed the large Divine Andre. I know I'm mainly using Occult, but as I'm using this kind of upgrade path anyway, I'd be remiss if I didn't get a high-grade Divine weapon for the skeletons in Nito's boss room. So, using chunks I farmed off screen, we get a Divine Longsword plus 9. Weirdly, the Divine Longsword actually looks better. Huh. Well, anyway, I grabbed the White Titanite slab laying outside Nito's boss room, and max upgraded our Occult Longsword to plus 5. Now, I was ready for Nito. I dropped in, and despite taking some initial hits from these skeletons, I recovered and took them out in a few swings with the Divine Longsword. Then, for I think the first time ever maybe, I actually went around and took out the big skeletons at the back of the room. It was easy enough to lure them one by one, and it only took about 3 hits to bring them down. Nito was way too slow to ever catch up to me, and the only danger was Nito's sword through the ground attack, but this is telegraphed by the scream and can be avoided by just standing still blocking. With the big skeletons taken out, it was fun to actually use the whole of this boss arena for once. I took him down with a few more slices. You know what the Gravelord does when his car breaks down? He calls a knee-tow truck. Okay, Faith is at 45 now. Alright, so we're on clear-up duty. First, we plunge the toilet demon to clear it out. Then, we flush Capra down the crapper. The gaping dragon becomes just gone. I then thought a lot about what I'd say to Stray Charles. I asked him what his favourite US state was, to which he said, "I've got Georgia on my mind," after which I told him to hit the road, Jack. Next, Ceaseless Discharge made me deceased. Hey, wait, that's not how this is supposed to go. You don't ruin my quick fire round. Also, I stole your sister's clothes. The Demon Fire Sage actually took Fire's ages to kill because in New Game Plus he just has a lot of health. At least he decided to just keep jumping up and down and let me kill him easily. For the Centipede, the damage was quite decent, letting me easily take out his limbs. I was doing quite well until he smashed me with a stomp and nearly killed me right at the end. Luckily, I recovered and took him out very aggressively because, to be honest, that really bugged me. Speaking of bugs, Bed of Chaos. I hate this game. I'm not happy that I'll be seeing a lot more of this area next cycle. At least we're up to 53 faith now. Okay, progress is good. I took out the Hydra and the Crystal Golem. What is going on today? This golem legit took more hits to kill than many of the bosses so far. This blue one went down a bit easier, thankfully. Because I'm feeling spicy, let's go do the DLC right now. Ian was up first again, and he seemed extra pissed off this time. And after all the nice things I said about him last time. This was honestly one of the sweatier Ian fights I've had in a while. The damage wasn't that much less than last cycle, but now he can one-shot me if I dodge incorrectly. I was able to take off his tail, which is always helpful, but that only seemed to enrage him more. I bricked it every time he went for the lightning projectile, and there were some very close calls. This fight took nearly 10 minutes surprisingly, which fills me with dread for what's to come. At last, a few final swings put Ian away, leaving me with a sanctuary feeling in my soul. Well, given how Ian went, I was expecting Artorias to be a similarly painful endeavour. Interestingly, it was, and it wasn't. The damage was pretty poor, so it was indeed a long and drawn out fight that came down to the wire. But, despite this, I did actually manage to do this on my first attempt. I think because of the last cycle, I had really got a good understanding of how to avoid his attacks. I still took some hits from misjudging things, and every time I needed to heal became a pulse-pounding few moments. I stuck to the heavy attack, and mainly baited his charge attacks which I could easily avoid and punish. He did manage to get a buff off at one point when I needed to heal, and weirdly he tried to do a second buff even though he was already buffed. I didn't even know he could do that. Maybe it's his buff day. In any case, after 13 minutes, Artorias is defeated. Faith is now up to 57, for all the good that's gonna do. As Artorias was dead, I decided to grab his Andre from Crest and then went to take out Sif. Man, it feels good to see some decent damage numbers again. Look at that health bar fly down. Not too many hits needed. I was definitely feeling apprehensive about the upcoming DLC bosses, so this was a nice break. I also grabbed the Hornet Ring while I was here. Using his souls plus some Popper Warns I had, I brought Faith all the way up to 60. So, interesting to note, despite the Occult and Enchanted longswords both having A scaling for their respective stats, the Enchanted longsword gets a much higher damage boost than the Occult one does. Not all A scalings are made equal, it seems. Alright, let's handle Seath now as well. The damage? Bad. Seath's health? Huge. His attacks? Pretty easy to avoid, honestly. Minimal concerns apart from not running away fast enough from the big crystal explosion, which is almost certainly a one-shot at this point. 7 minutes of running, and down he goes. This fight went as well for him as that time he tried to learn how to play piano. Well, he is scaleless after all. So, onto the 4 Kings, and guess what? Trying to do the 4 Kings with low damage on New Game Plus is bad. Who could have possibly predicted that? Now, I did get Havel set for this, but even with that on, if you get bad RNG like this, you might as well restart the fight because that wastes way too much time. This was maybe the most rage-inducing 4 Kings fight I've had in a long while. I actually decided to leave this one for a bit, so let's do something easier, like Calamite. Okay, easier might be a bit much, but still this felt positively relaxing after the 4 Kings attempts. Our damage was absolutely dreadful, and of course he gets a huge boost to his health in New Game Plus. It felt like most of these slashes were merely tickling him, honestly. I did come close to death on a couple occasions, and there was severe panic in my soul. But I persevered, and after 12 solid minutes of hacking away at his toes, I was able to claim victory. Let's keep moving. I've got deadlines to Calamite. Before Manus, I grabbed the White Titanite slab just in case, and then prepared to take him on. The first attempt was yet another example of pure pain. Not because of his huge health bar or our really low damage, because 10 minutes into the fight, I got the weapon at risk message and it threw me off so hard that I died. I can't believe how hard this run has gone downhill. Okay, you know what? We've come pretty far with the longsword, and we can pretty much establish that an Occult infused longsword is kinda trash for New Game Plus. So, let's try an Occult infused bastard sword instead. I think for the really high health bosses like Manus and the 4 Kings, this is acceptable. Plus, the damage isn't that much higher. See, it's not even twice as much, and the attacks are slower and cost way more stamina. I don't know if this really sped up the process, to be honest. This still took nearly 10 minutes to kill him. Maybe just seeing the yellow damage gave me the motivation to continue. I think we can pretty safely say that using Occult Infusion for the DLC bosses is a bad idea. With a few more overhand swings, we push Manus farther down into the abyss and leave the DLC behind until next cycle. Right, well there's just one roadblock remaining. First, I decided to grab the Grass Crest shield for a bit more stamina recovery. So back to this hell once again. Honestly, I don't even know if the extra damage from the Bastard Sword helped all that much. The faster stamina recovery of the Grass Crest shield might have been more of a difference maker than anything else. I just Havel tanked it all, making sure my health was at full at all times in case they did the explosion attack. Even though I wasn't able to kill them fast enough to keep it one-on-one, I was able to survive this time. I kept hacking, praying the whole way, until eventually I got the sweet cutscene signaling their defeat. That sucked. I felt very uncomfortable the whole time. Well, let's do Gwyn now. Funnily enough, he's the only other boss that is also supposedly weak to Occult, so let's see how much damage we do with a riposte boosted by the Hornet Ring. Honestly, I should stop expecting more from this. I mean, that's not bad, but I bet most weapons would do that without Occult Infusion. Okay, so overall thoughts? Yeah, this infusion is rough. Of course, if you're doing a faith build anyway with miracles, it makes sense to have so you've got a melee option, but the fact the A scaling for this is so much worse than the A scaling for Enchanted feels unnecessary. Why are you screwing the faith builds, FromSoft? Also, anyone else think it would have just made more sense to have the lightning infusion scale with faith instead, given that the miracles are mainly lightning? But the other big problem is the availability of this infusion. By far, the place you most want to have this infusion for is Anor Londo, given that almost all the knights and the 2 bosses here are both weak to it. But to do that, you'd need to get a bunch of white titanite chunks, grab the Dark Ember from the Painted World, and then travel back to Sens and all the way down to Andre to be able to actually infuse a weapon with this. Now, there is an occult club in Anor Londo, but again, white titanite chunks are not readily available. Finally, even if you do all that, the damage increase is only 10% anyway, so yeah, this infusion seems pretty pointless overall. Anyway, a few more ripostes and the Gwyns of Change blow. To visually represent how the end of this cycle felt, I set myself on fire. Right, let's do it. The final cycle, the cycle of chaos. We quickly take out Asylum Larry and return to Liarfink Shrine. So how to get a Chaos Infusion? Well, the steps we take here would be to go down to Blighttown and farm those pesky leeches again to get the green Titanite, but of course I took the liberty of bringing some to save time. We need to get our longsword to +5 and then upgrade it to a +5 fire longsword with the green Titanite, and for that we need to go find the most awkwardly placed blacksmith in the game. Yep, we're going down to the catacombs once again. This is a long old mission that requires turning this bridge and dropping down a whole load of ledges until eventually you drop down into this little hole where Vamos the blacksmith is hanging out. I'm pretty sure many people completed Dark Souls without ever finding this guy. What's also crazy is that the bonfire next to him was only added when they made the remastered version of this game. Imagine having to do that every single time you wanted to get to him, even with the Lord Vessel. He does actually sell normal Titanite shards, although you'd probably want to get them from Andre so you could farm the leeches more easily. Anyway, with the green Titanite, he now lets us make a fire longsword +5. Also, quick note, when you do this before getting the Lord Vessel, don't rest at the bonfire here and lose 700,000 souls like I did. Anyway, I made it out, and now let's go get the Chaos Ember. The good news is we just need to kill 2 bosses to get it. The bad news is one of those bosses is Quelaag, who is immune to fire. Also, did I mention the fire longsword has no scaling of any kind? Luckily, we can put that off for a little bit because there's some other things we need to grab first. I went and got the basement key, unlocked the shortcut, and headed to Lower Berg to fight Capra. This is the earliest we've gone to fight him in any of these cycles, and as such we can't even one-shot the dogs. Awesome. Well, I took them out with the old run up the stairs and drop off strategy. For Capra, our damage is pretty low even with a plunging attack. One good thing that does help speed it a little is that Capra actually takes full damage from falling, so that's something I guess. This damage is making me feel really nervous about the rest of this run, but at least this guy we managed to take out. You know how Capra travels across water? With a Gota boat. We can now make our way to the depths, where we free Laurentius. This was the main reason for coming here actually. Back at Firelink, we get the Pyro Flame from him and buy Flash Sweat. I now head back down to Blighttown, but before Quelaag, we're first going to go to the Great Hollow. Yep, it's finally time to come here. There's a red Titanite chunk here, and another one here. These chunks are precious, so it's worth coming here this time. With those in our possession, I then help Mildred have a really good time. Okay, I guess I can't put it off anymore. How bad is the damage? Well, yeah. Alright, Mildred, get in there. You got this. Damn it, Mildred, you had one job. Alright, there we go. That's better. I mean, okay, I could have fought Quelaag for about 30 minutes straight there, but I'm trying to get the Chaos Infusion as fast as possible, and besides, this was funnier. A naked woman with a sack over her head beating up a spider witch is always funnier. Sorry if you think doing it this way is sacrilege. I then ring the bell and then go to take out Ceaseless Discharge. He is also immune to fire, but luckily we only need to hit him 6 times to give him a dishonorable discharge. Now, using the Dark Moon Seance Ring, I attune Flash Sweat. Using Flash Sweat, I somehow avoid being clobbered by Taurus demons and grab the Chaos Flame Ember. Now, I'd love to say we can get the hell out of here, but unfortunately we actually have to do the worst farm yet to get some red Titanite chunks. The creatures that drop them are these burrowing rockworms that have huge resistance to fire and take a great number of hits to kill. But that one we just killed now next to the bonfire? Yeah, that doesn't respawn. Instead, we have to come over to this awful area with Taurus and Capra demons. Needless to say, this took a long time to do, but thankfully I only need 3 from here. Why 3, you ask? Well, let me show you. With the 3 farmed from here and the 2 from the Great Hollow, we now have 5 total. I've got a potentially easier way to get the 3 more we need, but first we've got to make the mind-numbingly long journey out of Blighttown and back into Firelink. Now, we return to the Asylum, where we trade the Pyro Flame for a red Titanite chunk. There's also 2 Black Knights here, both of which drop red Titanite chunks as well. With both dead, we now have the 8 we need. As I was here, I also grabbed the doll and took out the demon in the basement. Our damage was low, but still light years better than against Quelaag. I was able to slowly but surely take him down by strafing back and forth between his attacks. I now, once again, head down into these damn catacombs, eventually dropping into Vamos's room. We then give the Chaos Flame Vamos to Ember, and finally get ourselves a +4 Chaos Longsword. What a mission that was. Thankfully, I did not rest at the bonfire this time, so I can bone out of here easily. So let's talk about the properties of the Chaos Infusion. While its damage doesn't scale with any stat like the previous two, it does scale with Liquid Humanity. It caps at 10, but the boost applies to both the fire and physical damage of the weapon. I mean, the boost looks pretty small, so I'm kinda expecting this to be the worst we've seen yet, but hey, let's try it against the gargoyles. Hey wait, that's actually the best damage we've seen against the gargoyles so far. I mean, they are supposedly a little weaker to fire, but not by that much. I'm not trying to embellish it, but this is actually kinda decent. Down they go. We ring the bell and head into Sens one last time. We want to get the red titanite slab ASAP, of course, and getting the Lord Vessel is crucial to doing that. Up top, I went to take out the golem again, and the damage is not bad actually. It felt like it really didn't take that many heavy attacks to get him staggers, and a few sent him tumbling to his demise. Is this infusion actually good? As we travel to Anor Londo, I asked these guys carrying me what they thought, but their views were too biased to be useful. Shame they weren't more impartial. Well, on to Ornstein and Smo. This time I was determined to take out Smo first, just to keep things a little different. The damage was definitely less than the previous two cycles. Maybe that early boost from humanity has dropped off hard now, or perhaps they are just weaker to magic than they are to fire. Whichever was the case, the damage was still okay. I slashed away at the Executioner, who struggled to avoid my attacks because he was a bit smoverweight. For Ornstein, I did the old hug his ankles strategy. The damage was okay, and his attacks were easy enough to avoid as long as I kept an eye out for the butt slam. After a few more slashes, he just became the butt of my joke instead. Anyway, with the Lord Vessel gained, I head to the Daughter of Chaos, join the Covenant, and gift her 30 humanities. Now that we're at this ranking in the Covenant, we can open the Chaos Door to get into Lost Izalith before fighting the Demon Fire Sage and the Centipede Demon. Dropping down to this area with the Poison Floor, we can get the precious red titanite slab. With this, I went to take out the Demon Fire Sage, who thankfully does not resist fire damage at all for some reason. A boss with the word fire in its name not resisting fire damage is kinda wild, but honestly, I'm not complaining. I just want him gone, and after a few more swings, he gets the message. Okay, so it's Centipede Demon now. You know, another boss immune to fire. I was expecting this to be really awful, but it was not as terrible as I had imagined. The damage was fairly low, but compared to many of the other bosses, Centipede Demon doesn't have the highest of health. The physical damage of the longsword with this infusion was just about enough to carry us through this, meaning the boss didn't really center impede our progress. I then sandwiched the Izalith Pyromancer against this wall, and then made my bed and laid in it. Well, it's clear up time once again. So first, I took down the Taurus Demon with a torrential rain of slashes. The Gaping Dragon took similar damage to the last cycle. I just smacked his head back and forth like I was playing gay ping pong. I then slashed up the Butterfly so much with my Fire Sword that it became a butterfry. Sif, I think, was kinda tired by this point and didn't even really attack me that much while I killed her. She was very passive for once. You know what, the Four Kings is gonna suck, so I guess let's just try it now. Well, that's the worst damage against them so far by quite a lot. I think I'll need a different weapon for this one again. For that, we need another red titanite slab. I initially thought I could get another one in the DLC, like literally all the other colours of slab. But turns out that actually the red titanite slab is the only one not found in the DLC, which is pretty inconvenient. Now, we can trade an Ascended Pyroflame with Snuggly the Crow for one, if it weren't for the fact we traded away our Pyroflame earlier. Fear not though, as there is a way to get another one. First, I do a smoochy with this egg carrier. We have some time to kill now, so let's go clear up a few bosses. I ran down this corridor as this Dark Sun tried doling out some damage on me, but inevitably he failed and I slashed him up. My head sure is itchy though. Ah, hello there, I've been egg-specting you. Wish that didn't happen right before I was going into the painted world though. No matter though, as we just need to take out Priscilla, which is easy enough. I'm still not sure why she's called crossbred, but I guess that's why many people are in loaf with her. With our brains totally scrambled, Ingi is now our BFF and gives us a Pyroflame which we upgrade all the way to plus 15. But it seems once again I've made a bit of a cock-up. You see, only Quaylana can make a plus 15 flame into an ascended flame, and she doesn't appear if you've already killed the Bed of Chaos. Thank you, kind Saifu waifu. Please don't make me sleep on the balcony again. Anyway, after that long Zelda-style trading sequence, we get the slab and make a plus 15 Chaos Bastard sword. But before throwing myself back into the pain of the Four Kings, I decided to take out some of the other biggest threats remaining. So it's onto the DLC right now. After the fiasco of last cycle, this was a lot easier. Ian is indeed weaker to fire, so our damage wasn't too bad here. I'd also just gotten a better grasp of when I could and could not punish him. After just 3.5 minutes, I send Ian packing once and for all. I look forward to seeing him inside of a giant mech whenever we play that other FromSoft game, Armored Manticore. Well, let's see what our damage is like against Artorias with the Chaos Longsword. Yep, that's the worst so far, alright. So let's try the Chaos Bastard Sword instead. I mean, the damage is a bit better, but it's not incredible. The R2 of this sword deals the most damage, but it's extremely slow, so not advisable to use in many situations against such a fast opponent. The running R1 did almost as much, but was much quicker to pull off. It took only 2 hits to break him out of the buff animation, which I was very grateful for. The extra damage meant that this only took 9 minutes instead of probably 13 or something, which it would have done with the longsword. Know what this guy's favourite ice cream is? Carte d'Aureus. Deep down in the abyss, Manus waits for us for one final encounter. But guess what? We actually do more damage to him than we did last cycle. I mean, okay, we're talking like 23 more damage per R2 with our Chaos Bastard sword, but hey, that's something. I will take any extra bit of damage I can get. This actually took less time than Artorias for once, clocking in at just 7.5 minutes. You know, a casual normal time for a fight to take. I think Manus does just have some bigger openings, and most importantly, it's much easier to get a heal in if needed. The fight ends, and this is the part where I put a joke about his name in my manuscript. Okay, so far, the DLC hasn't been too bad this time round. I only died a couple times to Artorias, and I got Manus first try. Maybe I'm just desensitized to it all at this point. Only one boss remains. And what does me saying that things have been going smooth get me? A choke after fighting Calamite for 12 minutes. Now, just for the sake of it, I did test out the longsword, and it does about 3 damage per swing less than the last cycle. So we'll use the Chaos Bastard sword instead. The damage was a lot better, but the swing is very slow, and I also just kept choking. I don't know what it was, but over and over again I kept messing up. By far the most painful was when his stomp for some reason one-shot me. That was about 13 minutes in. Finally, after an hour or so of heartbreak, I decided to switch back to the longsword. Despite the damage being lower, this just somehow felt a lot safer, and I was able to recover quicker and dodge his attacks. There were still some pretty close calls, and this was one of the longest fights of the run, clocking in at nearly 14 minutes. There was also a heat wave at the time here in the UK, and needless to say, I was drenched by the end of this. At long last, this fight does not drag on any longer, and we pull off the win. What's that? I've used that joke before. Calamite doesn't deserve the good stuff after this fiasco. Time for the catacombs, and hey, at least I can warp to this bonfire this time. The damage to Pinwheel was much better, and we took him out before he could summon the huge swathe of clones. This was pretty smooth in my opinion. For the Tomb of the Giants, we had the Sunlight Maggot this time from taking the Door of Chaos route earlier, which made this a little bit more pleasant. Only a little bit. Nito was... he moves slow, we do very little damage, I run away a lot, yada yada yada. We pretty much Nito the line of the way this fight normally goes. Seath was next, and unfortunately somebody forgot to bring the Ring of Sacrifice, so I lost all my humanity. I was pretty angry about this, seething with rage in fact, so I quickly melted this dragon with my flaming sword. The damage was the best yet against him, so that's something. Eventually he died, and we called a Seath Fire. Okay, so that just leaves the Four Kings. I don't want to do this fight for a long while after this. Despite them having lower fire defense than magic defense, the damage I did to them was the lowest yet. The R2 of my Chaos Bastard sword did almost as much as an R1 did to them in the previous cycle. So, yeah, this was not fun. I pretty much just kept trying this until I got some good RNG where they didn't do the grab and I didn't get smacked by a second king while I was focusing on another. Killing them fast enough for it to be one-on-one was not possible by any stretch of the imagination. I was nervous up until the last moment, terrified I would get clipped and have to restart all over again. But my luck held, and with one final swing, this forking boss is finally done once and for all. At long last, I can end this run. So how did the Chaos Infusion fare? I mean, not great honestly. The base damage of the Infusion may be higher than Enchanted and Occult, but the boost from having 10 soft humanity is pitiful. While there are some bosses weaker to fire, there's also a lot with really high fire resistance and even actual immunities. This might still be good for the early game if you want to just put points into vitality and endurance, but the awkward location of the blacksmith that performs this infusion means that it'd be easier to attempt to get this once you've got the Lord Vessel. But by this point, other infusions or weapons will likely outclass it anyway. This infusion had the worst damage against many of the bosses here, but it's still perfect for the giant dad build I guess, so that's good. With Gwyn dead, I set myself on fire to finish the run. This might have been the most unexpectedly painful run I've ever completed. I had never used these infusions before this run, and I doubt I'll ever use them ever again. Thanks for watching. I've been JK Leeds. See ya, and have a good one.